Some folks will like you and some that just won't. Some that stay real and some that just don't. Trying to fit in will only take you so far. You'll never find home trying to change who you are. So don't spend your whole life trying to be what you ain't. You can't hide your heart with a new coat of paint. You think they'll accept you, I promise they can't. So just be who you are, forget what they think. So just be who you are and forget what they think.
Welcome to Vet with a Mic, content driven by veterans issues. So tonight we are going to be speaking to Dr. Diandra Poe, an Army veteran. Don't hold that against her. But she has her doctorate in social work. So I thought this would be a good conversation to have because she's doing some really cool things out there in the veteran community, specifically with military sexual trauma, that thing that we all get uncomfortable talking about, but needs to be talked about. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. I am waiting for the snow to melt here on the East Coast, so I'm good.
Snow? What's that? Down here in Nashville, we don't get much of that. I'm kidding. Okay. Yeah, it's actually it was lovely today. It was like 63 degrees down here.
Oh no, I don't know what lovely is below 70. So
Oh, see, I feel the same way. I feel the same way. You can put me in 120 degree weather, and I'm like, whoo, it's hot. Let it drop below like 65, and I cry.
yeah, I'm not a fan of the white stuff. So
Yeah, right.
born and raised here on the East Coast and grew up with it all my life, and I'm still not a fan.
Well, hopefully it won't last too much longer. So let's break right into it. What made you join the uniform? So, because during our pre-production talk, you have a kind of a roundabout way that you ended up in the uniform. I don't think that I've ever heard anybody go from a spouse to the uniform. I've heard uniform to the spouse, but never spouse to the uniform.
Yeah. So, I married a soldier, high school sweetheart, I guess you could call him that.
Mhm.
From high school to being a military spouse, and went through all the ups and downs of just growing up with someone. Prior to 9/11, things looked, very different. And so I found myself away from my small little hometown of graduating with like 89 people. I know nowadays people are like, what? Yeah, I think it was like 89, 91. Somebody from my hometown will correct me. But either way, I, found myself away from home in this new environment and really trying to figure my way around everything that was happening. Ultimately, that marriage did not last. So that, is now my husband, as I have been told that's the new term.
That is funny. I've never heard of that. A husband.
That's
Yeah.
my husband.
We don't. Yeah. So what's the male equivalent to that? What's your was wife or
You guys don't get you
Oh.
don't get a quirky term for us.
Oh, that's too bad.
No. But either way, I found myself at Fort Huachuca in Arizona, immersed myself into the FRG program. I actually started being a part of the FRD program while we were stationed in Germany. And this was right after 9/11. Things were very, very still like New York was still smoldering and things were going on as our men and women were being carted off to fight. I found myself in this community of the family readiness group there trying to help other people that are away from their country, away from their family. And then through this, a tragedy happened with one of the spouses. And it just kind of led me down this service of this is my community. These are my family. These are people that I'm around all the time. And I wanted to help. So then I, joined the FRG and became a real integral part of my husband's unit. And Fort Huachuca, his commander, kind of took a liking to how I was running things, being, a part of all the groups and really just like removing the rank structure of it all. Cause, in the military, some of the spouses like to think they wear their husband's rank.
Yeah, trust me, I worked the gates. I know it.
So my husband was like an E nothing. There was no rank whatsoever that I could flex at all. Like he was, yeah, again, enlisted. So I couldn't flex anything. But what I could do was, flex my knowledge and just my heart to serve the people around there. And I was grateful that his commander saw that in me. So he kind of gave me a lot of leeway. But then, my marriage was falling apart. And he was like, "You would make a great officer." And I was like, so in the divorce, I like to tell people all the time, like, he got the car and I got his commander. So his commander just started kind of pouring into me, helping me get into ROTC programs and scholarships. And whoosh, I was carted away to George Washington University with a scholarship to the ROTC program there, being pre-law. I wanted to be a lawyer once upon a time.
Well, don't hold that against yourself. I mean,
and then I grew a conscience.
Right. So, what's funny? I was just talking to a spouse earlier today, and she works with an organization that's out there doing great work within the veteran community. And I asked her, I said, "Hey, are you a vet as well?" And she said, "No, I was just a spouse." And I said, "Don't use the word just." I said, "I'm not trying to be bossy, but that word just really cuts the well, hello." Cuts the what you sacrificed for the uniform as well right out from underneath you, because whenever we have an empty place at the table for a holiday, that's you that absorbs that cost, not the uniform. So I know I don't want to minimize the contributions that spouses do, because they really do a lot to keep the uniform going. I mean, if you've ever been in the uniform, you know how much they do. For good or for worse, they really do have a lot of things going behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about that. How was that going from someone who is being able to talk to the commander and a valued contribution, let's just say somebody who could speak freely to an officer, to now you're in the hierarchy, you can never speak freely ever.
Right. It was I had this crazy idea that I was going to be this change agent and I was going to go in and restructure the Army. I laugh about it now because back then it wasn't funny. But no, I really did have the mindset this was my community, and I wanted to serve my country as well. I thought in my head that I understood the culture of the Army enough to be able to navigate. Having been in, I found myself at the end of a broken marriage, but still, wanting to. Now, mind you, I had 3 children. I have 3 children, adults now, but my son was special needs. And so a big portion of the first half of my marriage was spent supporting him and then supporting our child. And here I was like at the end of this thinking, this is all that my children know. I don't want to change that. I really love this community. I love my country. I want to serve. There were a few things that went into factoring all of this, wanting to go to school, all of it.
So that's interesting to me. And maybe this is just the enlisted personnel in me, but I joined the service, and a lot of people who are sitting in that chair, so to speak, talk about the reason why we enlisted was to really change our station in life, because we were in spots. And so it was either that or we were on the boulevard of broken dreams. So we did the modern day equivalent of running away and joining the circus. Right? Yeah.
Clown shoes and all.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I don't think that I knew going in. I mean, obviously, if I known, hindsight is always 20/20.
Isn't it though?
When you look backwards. But I really did come in with this, this wide-eyed dream of being able to serve, and I wanted to make a career, like retire early. Even though I was older, I still was like, I want to retire before I'm 65.
Wait, how old's older?
I did not commission until I was 32, 33.
Yeah, okay. So I was in basic training whenever I turned 24 in basic. So yeah, and I was already the old man of the group, is what everybody looked at.
I was called the grandma of the group,
Yeah.
so my nickname was Gma immediately.
Well, Althea is another female veteran we talked to. She runs She Vets It, and she talks about that people just used her as the marker, like don't get caught behind Althea. Yeah, because she was 39, I think, when she enlisted.
Wow.
Right?
And I know of her. We've had like interactions on social media and everything. I follow her. I love her work. So
Yeah, she's a sweet lady. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not know that about her. I can't wait to go to Texas and connect with her because I've only connected with her on social media. So
Yeah.
I can't wait. But yeah, 30.
So I echo that. I had a certain optimism that whenever in the uniform, and I've gone back and forth to whether or not to tell this story, because there was something that stomped out my optimism really quickly. I had a pretty close friend who fell victim of your expertise, or the what Glass Soldier really tackles. And I don't want to go into too many details about it, but I saw the failure of command structure into how to deal with that. And any of the optimism that I had, oh, these people really care about me, we're all like a big family, quickly got stomped out. I realized really quickly that all that glitters wasn't gold within the uniform. And that really was a watershed moment for me. I remember feeling, of course, the story is rather cliche at this point. Something happened. It became my friend's fault, her fault, and she was forced to apologize to us. So I just don't know how else other to bring in like an anecdote that this isn't just some topic that we don't all have some, even if it's tangential, connection to.
Right.
We hear the stories. Some of us have lived through it. And I remember feeling when in that moment, I remember there was particularly this one E8 that I was trying to get this situation that was happening in real time. He walked away from me whenever I was asking for help. Hey, I need, like, there's something going on in this room. I need help. And he turned around and walked away. And I remember out of frustration just going, right, got it. Chiefs lead the way. Got it. Right. And I was, because I was at this point, I was, well into my 24th year on the planet. So I was an adult, I felt like,
Right.
at least. And I knew that this was something that this wasn't just high school drama. This is something that we have a situation. You're on this particular building's, it was like an RA essentially. You're supposed to be helping with situations like this. But I didn't mean to spring that on you, but I just know that when we were talking, your story, your optimism got, because this was my first command. I wasn't even I graduated from basic in October, went to A school, was done with A school by December. This was happening in January.
Yeah.
So I was as fresh into the uniform as you can pretty much be.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that we share such similarities to a problem, especially across branches. That one of the things I say all the time when I'm talking to people is my story is uniquely mine, but it's not unique by today's standard at all.
Yeah.
Because at a stone's throw, I mean, I can stand in formation and throw a rock and hit someone who's been affected by this.
Yeah.
Literally, and I don't have to toss it very far. So that's one of the biggest, I think, like gut punches that I don't think leadership or even the average person really understands. They look at the statistics and they're like, oh, 20,000 people reported sexual assault, in 2018, 2019. There's 500,000 service members. And I'm like, 20,000 people were brave enough to come forward.
Right. Right. And to your point, the two like personal experiences that I have, one male, one female.
Hmm.
The female came forward. The male told me in a just we were out there in the desert together, just in the middle of watch. I guess he just had to tell somebody.
Hmm.
And that was, and I asked him, I said, did you ever? And he's like, first person I ever told. And I remember feeling some kind of way about it. Like, of course, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with those feelings that that was coming at me.
Hmm.
There was a certain, you want to go, not my uniform. No, not nobody would really do that to you. Right. So there's a reason why we have these natural, I guess we just don't want to accept it, but it happens with enough frequency now that it's where it's
Yeah.
ridiculous to try to assume that this doesn't legitimately happen in the uniform.
Right.
And you're right. I don't if it is 20,000 out of 500,000, let's just to let's put
Right.
this to perspective. There are 15,000 average homicides a year out of 340 million people. So if it's 20,000 out of 500,000, that's a lot. That's a ton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's appalling. It is. And, we could still like even put that into perspective, a football stadium of people. That's a lot of people. To say that 1 in 4, like I said, you can throw a stone and know that someone has been affected by it, whether they are the victim or survivor themselves, or the person who's knows them,
Yeah.
their child, their sister, their brother, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, statistically, people see the numbers and it still does not register up here.
Yeah. And obviously that encompasses a large variety of behaviors, right?
Mhm.
And so I think there's people just want to jump to like this is just the worst part of that continuum of behaviors, but it's not. I mean, that may be less statistically likely.
Mhm.
Just like something as horrible as like forcible rape, where but there are a whole host of behaviors that fall up and down that continuum, just
Mhm.
not okay.
Right.
And that is one of the things that you kind of have to put into context for people too. When they hear it, they almost don't know what to do with it, like that large of a number. But it does include several different types of behaviors all within that. So it's not. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of like solace that you can take from that, but it's still an atrocious, it's a terrible number
Right.
to think about. Yeah.
When you think about us as being the most, one of the most powerful military forces in the world, um, to have that lack of discipline, when it comes to something so, something when we raise our children, like we don't hit people, and tell,
Mhm.
little kids, like, use your words, if you have a problem with somebody, and somehow that gets lost after 5th grade. I don't know. Um,
Hormones. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, and I don't mean to cut you off there, but I think this is just something that I covered in the alcohol or the drinking issues episode. Is there something that we have to talk about our culture of consumption within the uniform as well? This idea of, oh, well, I can hold my liquor, I can drink you under the table, all that rah rah ree stuff. That's actually pretty predictive of negative outcomes that are around the bend if you're having that kind of tolerance and the
right.
same amount doesn't affect you the same way. And I think that these two issues maybe dovetail together more closely than people realize. I mean, you've obviously done some research as well. I mean, I think Glass Soldier does conduct its own research, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we've seen the literature about just how people don't really understand social cues the same way whenever they've been drinking. Guys, guys
Yeah.
really don't get social cues whenever they've been drinking. Women are still is prone to it, but there's just something about guys that we walk away from a situation if there's a few drinks in us going, yeah, man, she was totally like
into me.
she totally was all over me. Like it's just, and then obviously when you're sober, it's like, actually, dude, she was trying to be nice and get you to go away from her.
Right.
But I think we can't have this conversation without talking about alcohol in some because that's largely what people also use to dismiss victims as well.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, well, while you were drunk, you wanted it, you sober up and you don't anymore. Because I've heard that, I can't tell how many times
Too many.
from people using that as like a post hoc justification as to why they let something go too far. But sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
Yeah. No, that's okay. And that's, again, when we're talking about statistics, I want to point out to people also that when we think about who's being assaulted and who's the perpetrators of these, they're typically junior enlisted or junior service members. And that's one of the reasons why, like, for us in this organization, we understand that in the ROTC program, kids are coming straight out of high school. Not only do they not have the capacity to understand everything that they're being asked to do, but also at the same time, we're asking them to make some very real adult decisions before they even have the capacity to understand what it is they're about to do. Now you add in alcohol and the freedom to be able to drink or do whatever you want when some of them are straight out of the womb and into the military. And I mean like high school to raising their right hand. Some of them may have the option to go to college and they get that college experience and the drinking parties and so forth. You don't know, the chemical reaction that someone may have to alcohol. If their parents were, alcoholics, whatever the case may be, there's so many layers to this. But then you put them in these situations as to go out and say, okay, you're asking them to make a decision to go out into combat and kill somebody. And then at the same time, you like present them with this alcohol and this freedom and you like, don't touch anybody. You're like, I'm fighting for my country. I'm about to lose my life for my country. I darn sure have the right to do whatever I want to do. Mindset of some kids is they've been like exposed to so much stuff. Like now there's just like what I call murder porn. They are desensitized to so many things and just inundated with information coming out them 100 miles an hour. So when you factor in alcohol on top of it and put in a situation where they, barracks where they're not being checked on like they used to be, you don't have accountability. You have officers or leaders that are just like, that's not my problem, or they don't want to get involved. You've got leaders that are doing things and not being punished for it. So, Private Snuffy does one thing and he's out the Army, but let Major Snuffy do it and he gets to retire and get reduced in rank. Yeah. So there's so many things that come at and just factor all of that in. And now you've got a recipe for a culture that just continues to repeat itself and cycle and over again. Sexual assault in the military is not new. But you have leaders that it was okay 20 years ago to say the things that they said or do the things that they did. Go back 30 or 40 years, Vietnam era, it was probably even worse for women.
Yeah.
In the military.
And I'm going to catch some hell about this, but I remember when Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed. And I just use this as kind of, look, the military structures were slow to change, right? So, everybody used to use the F word, this disparaging comment for gay men as just regularly. And I remember, my little brother is same-sex oriented, right? I mean, I don't necessarily talk about myself a lot here anyway, but I remember talking to guys that I was serving with, like, hey, listen, that's not really okay to say that word. Like you wouldn't use the N word. You wouldn't use this word. Like this is, to be honest with you, man, with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the writing's on the wall. And I remember them, some feeling, a certain, this is so sensitive. How dare, like, and it's like, it's one of those things that we need to change it, man. It's not, that's a part of our culture that we could probably do without.
Right.
We have enough vocabulary words to come up with something else that we figure that, when we're calling something lame or whatever, you don't have to just use something that makes a particular type of person feel completely like just alienated. Right. So to your point, yeah, I think our structures are slow to change when it comes to these type of things, because I believe that there's this, well, maybe it's exaggerated a little mentality to, some of our ranks. Hopefully, the young ones that are coming in now, I don't think they tolerate it nearly as much as the older ones did.
And that's what I'm most excited about in terms of this, because to me, it's going to take a cultural shift. Like the paradigm is going to have to shift. It's going to. It's just, I mean, we've seen it, in terms of where we've come from as a country, us being a fairly new country, things that have changed, period, in our culture. And to your point, there are a lot of words that have been used in the past.
I think we lost you.
Oh,
I'm just going to see if we can't keep filling this in. Yep.
There we go.
Oh, okay. You back? Oh,
I am.
All right.
No, I was saying, to your point about words, there was a lot of words that, we used to be able to use 50 years ago. That's not okay now. As we grow, and our knowledge, when you know better, you do better. So to me, there is going to be a cultural shift. The generation that's, the next 10 years of people that are coming into the military absolutely will push out the people that have now been serving 20 and 30 years that have seen these policies and things in place. But we've always had the policy in place.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. We're tap dancing around something that was the model, and that was race in the uniform. That's really what everybody used that example. But there were people who still harbored those type of feelings. But I've said this probably at least half a dozen times at this point. Now it is dangerous to harbor those kind of feelings towards people in the uniform now, because you're isolated, you're ostracized. Like if somebody was a white supremacist in the uniform, nobody trusts them.
Yeah.
Nobody. They're like, nah, man, you're not cool with me, buddy. Go stand over there. And that's kind of a testament to, look, change happens and we evolve, within the uniform itself. Because there was once upon a time where it would be sticking your neck out to stick up for somebody who was a person of color. But let's get to you for a second, because I know I kind of just jumped in there. So going back to your early experiences in the uniform were pretty devastating as well. And I don't want to be an emotional tourist here, but can you walk us through a little bit about what your story actually entails?
Yeah. As we said before about my story not being unique and ours being so similar. I could sum it up in a couple of words, but I'll go through it. But the shorter version is I graduated in May 2011. I went to Fort Knox that summer to participate in LTC. I went to Bullock at Fort Lee, Virginia, and graduated in November 2011. I got to my first duty station December of 2011. I was assaulted by end of January 2011.
And you weren't
2012, sorry. So less than 60 days in uniform.
Yeah. And let's just say this as well. You weren't some young, naive girl putting yourself into some position, which is the often the criticism that you hear a lot is, well, you shouldn't have been doing that. Shouldn't have been putting yourself in that position. which is a bullshit like
Oh,
challenge, if I'm being honest.
yeah.
Um,
No,
you know,
this wasn't a situation where even myself, no one is prepared for those situations, even if they're inebriated, even if they went out to have drinks, no one is ever in their mind prepared to be assaulted or violated. No, this happened in my home while my children were asleep by another
right.
officer who in processed with me. He saw an opportunity for someone who was new to the post. He was not unfamiliar with the process because he outranked me.
Mhm.
So he completely took advantage of the situation. And, um, I get asked a lot, especially when I tell my story that, my children being in the home, you know, what's going on in your mind. And the only thing that I could think of at the time as a mom is please don't let my children walk in and see. Please
Mhm.
don't let my children wake up. Um, in my mind, I was like, this trial would have been completely different because what if my children get involved? What if he hurts them? The mother bear in me would have completely changed. My trajectory would have been different. I was not concerned for my own safety at that moment, just my children. And
Yeah.
yes, during trial, they did everything to discredit me. Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you wake up your son? He's 12. I think my oldest was 13 or 12 or 13 at the time. It's like, why didn't you scream for him to
Oh,
help you?
lost you again.
Oh, I have so many. Can you hear me? Oh no.
I lost you again. Yeah.
I'm here.
So yeah, the last thing I heard was, "Why didn't you yell for your son? He's 12."
Right. Yeah, the defense did everything they could to try to discredit me for not fighting. And it's such a weird space because in my head, as I'm going through this, I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't even know how you can sleep at night and ask someone that question. But that's not what I was thinking at the time. And I wasn't a social worker at the time, so I had no idea what fight, flight, or freeze meant.
That's what I was going to bring up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of the another example
Mhm.
of how the legal process is just so far behind what we know scientifically.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, because I know that there's numerous states at this point where that's no longer a plausible defense. Like no one ever says that. And yet again, the military being a little slower on some regards too is, that's like saying, well, why didn't you respond this way in combat?
Right. Yeah.
Like it's an alien situation. That's
Right.
why, you can't predict how you're going to respond
Yeah.
whenever you're experiencing a threat to your person, and to your point, also your children, and a whole host of different things that kind of be running in the background why something like that is happening.
Oh. And
Yeah.
I said the same thing about, when we think about, as I talk to other young ladies about their gut instinct and, our innate ability, I think about the people during 9/11. A plane hit a building. No one in their mind is thinking, like for the people that unfortunately jumped from the window to the people that stayed behind because firefighters, someone in an authority position said, no, stay still. Even though probably every fiber of their being is saying, I need to get out of
Mhm.
here, you have this authority figure telling you, sit still. No one knows how they're going to react. And some of us look to other things to give us clues of I'm in danger and I need to do something. Mine was I need to protect my children. In my mind, it wasn't about my own personal safety, but theirs
Sure.
because I had no idea what this guy was going to do to me. If he was that crazy enough to do something like this to me in my home, I had no idea what he would do to my children. So
Sure.
no, no one, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in a lot of traumatic situations that can attest that I have no idea whether they were the hero in the situation. They're like, oh, I just ran in that burning building without thought of
Mhm.
self, or they ran the opposite direction. I don't blame anybody for wanting to self-preserve at
Yeah.
all.
And and there's been a handful of times now in my life that I have felt like I was on autopilot, that I wasn't even really there, right, while things were happening, both in the uniform and out. So it's just, it is, the legal system really just doesn't. I know that they're attempting to give people like due process, but really we got some work to do in the legal system. Obviously, I think everybody knows that, but I don't want to linger here too long because I want to get to the part where obviously you've taken this into a crusade,
Yeah.
where you've done a lot of good in the world at this point out of this pain. I'm sure it felt unbearable pain at the time, but you've certainly lessened the pain of others as much as you can in your life after this. So let's talk a little bit about Glass Soldier. How long has Glass Soldier been up and running?
So we became an official 501(c) in October of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. We're
Hmm.
like, let's do this. We started. It's actually Glass Soldier started for me the day of my trial, which took 2 years, by the way, as we're talking about due process. It took 2 years for me to go to trial. Um, but as I was waiting the verdict, I had two junior soldiers come up to me, three junior soldiers come up to me while I was waiting. And the conversation just plays out in my head all the time because I remember it clear as day. And they came up to me and they said, "Ma'am, we've never seen an officer come forward."
Hmm.
And it was such a powerful statement with me that it stuck to me as I went back into the room waiting. Because in that moment, I had felt so empowered and yet so incredibly alone because she said never.
Hmm.
And mind you, they're junior. They've been in longer than me, clearly, because I had only been there for a couple of months, now 2 years. But still, that moment was just, it's so poignant in my life that it was then that I started thinking about, why am I the only one? Why have they never seen someone come forward?
Well, my job in the uniform was I was a military police officer. So, there are two avenues that you can use, unrestricted and restricted. So I know that there's a lot that happens on the restricted side that
Mhm.
you just never really get all the details for. And so I know that that person may feel like no one never, right? But the truth of the matter is there's been a ton of people, officer and enlisted ranks, who have spoke up.
Mhm.
Now we just don't know their outcomes, right? We
Yeah.
don't know. Most people just don't choose to go to trial because of how like labor intensive it really is. I mean, it is some serious emotional labor you have to go through a trial. So I just wanted to. I'm a slightly bit more optimistic than those two junior people there, because I have had to talk to people who have been in those situations before, and as much care and diligence as you can give it to them, ultimately that is a remarkably intimate decision for them to make.
Yeah.
And yeah,
No, I originally filed a restricted report
sure,
because I was, again, the retaliation aspect of his rank and the things that were going on. I was not going to come forward. I
sure,
wanted to just go on with my life. I wanted to take care of my children. I just, wanted to keep my head down. Um, but it just progressively got worse for me, unfortunately.
yeah,
And I found myself in a situation where um, he broke into my home while I was gone. And when I lived on post at the time. So as you know, this was this wasn't new that post housing was run by private contractors, but I went to the post housing and told them that, someone broke in my home. I wanted to change my locks. Well, they were like, "Well, you have to call the MPs and file a report." And I'm like, "I don't want to do that." But I called the MPs and I filed a report, and they were like, "Do you know who did this?" And I was like, "Yes, but I don't want to say." And then my hand was kind of forced.
I see. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they were like, "You can't file if you're not willing to say." They were kind of trying to getting me to do it, and I still was like, "Absolutely not."
Well, I can attest. There are a lot of poorly trained MPs. I can attest. There are a lot. I'm not trying to be too mean, but there are a lot of um, people who just don't really understand the unrestricted restricted. They don't understand context. That really, they're more like literalists. They're detail people, right? And so they don't necessarily think globally at times, but and I'm just shots fired, but
Your fault to the I mean,
yeah,
again, at the time that I'm going through this, I have, no idea how to advocate for myself in this area because it wasn't my wheelhouse.
yeah,
Again, I wasn't a social worker. I I changed my mind about going to, law school. So I was like, I'm definitely not, even in that my mind frame was to protect my children.
yeah,
Um, Luckily for me, I think my life experience, which I had gone into the military thinking that I had enough life experience to bring to the table, I took pictures of everything. I
oh,
took
lost you again.
screenshots. I took
Lo- oh,
screenshots of
oh.
everything. So,
I'm sorry, I lost you there again
oh,
there. So you said you felt like you had enough life experience.
right. I
Yeah.
felt like I had enough life experience to help me navigate what was going on. So for me, I took pictures. I took screenshots of everything that was going on, messages that he sent me when he broke into my house. So for me, luckily, when I went to trial, I had evidence.
Yeah.
I had things, and unfortunately, he was the type of person that didn't just stop at me. He assaulted other people. So that also helped in that aspect that there were other people that came forward that said, this guy's a pretty bad person. Mind you, the entire 2 years he was still allowed to wear uniform and go to work and do whatever he wanted to do, and rightfully so. That's his due process as well.
Sure.
Um, but for me, that was I want to say in my mind frame was to preserve everything. Um, if I had to give myself any grace in that and through that whole process, is that I made sure that I kept everything, receipts of everything, screenshots before screenshots were even a thing, um, and just taking pictures of what was going on. It helped me in the long run. That's not everyone's story, unfortunately,
Sure.
but definitely a part of Glass Soldier. And what I try to teach people right now is definitely keeping evidence and making sure they document everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, as well trained as you can be, it's still just a matter of repetition. Well, actually, just like with a small police department, they're not used to handling a lot of types of cases because they don't see it very often. And that includes the CID or NCIS, whoever.
Mhm.
There's still a matter of repetitions that they may not be as skilled in the things in which they're trained to be because they just don't have as many repetitions. Now, I wanted to ask you something because I thought this was really fascinating. On your website, glasssoldier.org,
Mhm.
did I see something about trafficking as well?
I think you might have, or I talked to you about it, as that's
Okay.
like a nuance. That is what I do during the day.
Hmm.
I switch capes. During the day, I work with survivors of human trafficking, confirmed
Hmm.
cases or suspected cases of human trafficking here in the city of Baltimore.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but
So let
that's not new to the military either.
right. Of course not, because we get a lot of human trafficking training, at least, even if they were just the generic from big Navy or big Army
Mhm.
trainings. Let's talk a little bit about that. Now, are these people related to the uniform, or are they just somebody that people you come across within the Baltimore area?
No, so I am a part of an organization that's So here in the state of Maryland, they have the Maryland Human Trafficking Taskforce.
Mm.
And then every county has their own like sub-task force for Baltimore City and Baltimore County. So we work with the task force in terms of like the overarching goal of human trafficking. So human trafficking encompasses labor trafficking, unfortunately, organ trafficking,
Mm.
familial trafficking. There's so many aspects of trafficking. I think when most people think of human trafficking, they think of kidnapping girls, or they think of the movie Taken, where they're just,
Mm.
given drugs and they're forced to go into like sex.
Yeah. The sex trade. Yeah.
Right. That's literally one part of trafficking.
Mm.
Um, and speaking of, Super Bowl weekend is the largest like weekend of human trafficking. It is the worst weekend of any time of the year. Super Bowl is one of the largest commodities of human trafficking.
I wonder why that is.
Well, when you got a lot of very powerful people getting together to talk about the Super Bowl, it is
Mm.
sex and money and betting and all the nuances you think of powerful
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so how do you process that? I mean, that's a pretty heavy. I mean, not only with the MST stuff, but just human trafficking in general. That's a lot of company and human misery. How do you keep your wits about you dealing with that kind of heavy human content every day?
First and foremost, my faith. I am. It's just a part of who I am. I cannot go into dark places like this without having God in me to guide me, to cover me, to protect me. It's just a part of who I am every day. It's a part of my, my routine is to just, let God guide me and pour into me, because I pour into other people. So at the end of the day, I'm an empty cup. I'm not going to lie. I'm exhausted. But I get refilled because my faith tells me that, what I went through has purpose.
Mm.
And that purpose, that pain turned into my purpose of being able to pour into other people and pull them into the light as well. Because as I try to, I put it in a picture of the way that I've been trained, in that going through trauma like this is like going through a tunnel. It's dark, it's scary. Nobody wants to go in there. Even though you can see the light at the other end, the only way to get to that light is to keep pushing and to
Yeah.
keep going. So I really try, when I'm working with people, when I'm talking to people that are in these situations, to really get them to see that tunnel, that right now it's dark, but I'm right here with you. And we're going to go to the other side of this. And we might have to stop along the way, and it may get scary, but we know that the other end, the other side of this is light. And that's what really keeps me going, is knowing that that some people are just stuck in the dark.
Yeah. You know, I've heard this quote several times. It's been attributed to quite a few people, but they say when going through hell, don't stop, right? Because why would you want to stop in the middle of hell, right? Do you use EMDR in your psychotherapy?
I do. Uh,
Okay.
I do. And I was introduced to EMDR myself when I was at Fort Hood.
Mm.
With everything that was going on when I first got to Fort Hood, that's when the whole sex ring, prostitution ring in the Sharp office was busted wide open. Because Fort Hood is famous for a lot of things. And that was like my very first immersion into the culture on Fort Hood, was being a part of that sex ring and going through my mental health. So I want to back up for a second, because I want people to understand that while my entire career was overshadowed by this one event, there was some positive part of it when I got to Fort Hood. My first unit that I was stationed there with was the 36 Engineers, the 36 Engineer Brigade. And I always want to give them their shout out, because my leadership at that time is the example. They are the standard to how people should be treated when they're going through this.
Mm.
My leadership covered me. My brigade commander was essential to my growth in my career, but also my healing process. They allowed me to heal and still be able to be a contributor while I was in uniform. To my detriment, it kept me from promoting because I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. Remember, I was waiting for trial for 2 years. So I wasn't allowed to deploy. I wasn't allowed to go on field exercises. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things because they kept pushing back the date, or the date was coming up and I had to go back and forth to Georgia several times. However, when it was time for me to get promoted and I was passed over, he used his position and his knowledge of what was going on with me to advocate for me all the way up to HRC. And that kind of leadership should be duplicated throughout the military. No questions asked. He should not be the exception to the rule. He should be the exception to the standard. And that was probably the best thing that happened to me in terms of my military career, that little bit of time that I was there with the 36 engineers.
Yeah. You know, that's good to hear that there's somebody out there who is handling that difficult situation with some sense of poise and delicacy, or not delicacy. They're being delicate. Okay. Yeah. They're handling it in some way that restores some faith that the hierarchy can function as intended. But you know, it's one of those things that this situation is just. I've talked about this probably a handful of times. I largely avoid talking about this because I think the last person that needs to talk about it is somebody who looks like me, right? But you know, I can sit here and talk to I'm blue in the face about how trauma works and you know what PTSD is, and but the truth of the matter is that people don't really know how just pernicious this is to the person, because going back to that optimism, you want to believe that the people you are serving with have your best interest in mind. And whenever somebody just devastates that, just demolishes it to nothing left, pulverizes it,
right?
You look around and go, now this, it may even feel a bit naive in the beginning. Like I was naive. Look how can now I can trust no one.
Right.
And it's good to hear that there are times in which somebody just goes, "Hey, Poe, I got it.
Yeah.
I believe you. We're going to take care of this. We're going to handle it." And just do something to try to put a Band-Aid over that festering wound that is not only the first initial breach of confidence, but just the 1,000 cuts that come after it. Yeah.
Yeah. And mind you, I want to, like, you know, while we're painting this picture, the the crazy part is it's not just men. You know, I had my share of leadership at Fort Stewart that were absolutely horrendous. But to me, the most, I guess, the audacity and the
yeah, women can be shitty too. Yeah.
My commander, at the end of the day, it was my commander. My commander testified against me at my trial. She did not believe me at all because she couldn't understand how I was processing it. You know, in her mind, you don't look like a victim. You don't look like somebody did something to you. So in her mind, she had a picture of what an assault victim would look like. She had a picture of what rape victims would look like. And it didn't look like me. Therefore, it couldn't be true. And you talk about having to process something. I was like, I thought, you know, girl power. What are we doing here? I couldn't even understand. And every part of me wanted to just like fight her on a regular basis.
You know, I blame Hollywood portrayals for a lot of stuff. And this is kind of one of those times in which Hollywood portrayals, everybody just, you got to look like, what's that show? Sex Crimes? Is that what it's called?
Oh,
Law and
um,
Order? Special
Law
Victims Unit. Yeah. That everything has to look like neat and tidy like that. And it never does. There's so much gray, there's so much context to any given situation that if things were that transparent, that clear, black, white, then we wouldn't have the problems that we do in the world. But since if you're using that standard, I get angry when civilians apply that same standard to people in the uniform, right? Is like, no, we don't all storm the beaches of Normandy, right? That's not what uniform life is largely like.
right.
So it's just, I think Hollywood has a tendency to just remove nuance
Hmm.
because they're storytellers and they want things to fit into tropes, the good, the evil, you know.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah,
And it's not all violent. Every assault is not a violent assault. And I think people really need to understand that as well. Every rape is not a violent rape or an assault. It doesn't always end with violence or have to be violent.
mm,
In my case, it wasn't. I think that's what people are looking for. Because again, I didn't fight. And I have talked with many victims that literally have said, I couldn't do anything but lay there and just wait and think in my head, I cannot wait for you to finish.
yeah, and I mean, of course, because you're training that what dissociation is. I mean, that is a complete, let's just say, removal of your autonomy, I guess you'd call it. You feel a disconnection from your physical self. And there are
Correct.
people who report feeling, watching this happen to them from the ceiling, like they are
Right.
just looking down on this thing happening. So the brain probably developed that ability as a preservation mode, right?
Yeah.
Is that this is a way of making sure that you do not withstand any more physical damage.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like I said, context and nuance, and a little bit of compassion in these issues, are not only, I don't necessarily say remedy, but they are vital to getting
Right.
to some semblance of what's next, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
well, we are coming up on the 57 mark here, or 58 mark. Is there anything that you feel like we should have got to? I know we got stuck in a few little times there. Um,
Yeah. This was great. I'm having talked about, where I've been and where I'm coming from. The goal, I think I want to point out the goal of Glass Soldier. Our goal is not to like pull back the curtain and expose the DoD. Um, that's not the goal of our organization. Our number one goal is about data. And I understand that numbers lie, people lie. I get it. Numbers can be skewed. However, my the number one mission for us is to create a safe space for service members of every branch to be able to report, but also to reveal what that reporting means. Because again, we know that 20,000 people were brave enough to come forward, but what about the people that aren't? And
mhm,
what is that data showing us? The DoD reveals to us, age, rank, and branch of who's being assaulted. But what about women of color? What about men? What about the LGBTQ plus community? What does that look like for them? That's not in the data when it comes to reporting. And what can that tell us about our training going forward? Not just prevention wise, but innovative. Like we've been doing the same thing for the policies and practices have been there for years. What are we missing here? Um, so our mission is not just about pulling back the curtain, but really the accountability piece, making sure that private snuffy and major snuffy both get justice, or justice is served no matter what your rank is, and the transparency in that data and collaborating with other organizations, because right now the trust factor is gone. If service members trusted that they could come forward and report, then retaliation wouldn't be so high.
Mm.
So our first and foremost mission is about reporting and getting our service members a way to be able to safely report without the fear of retaliation. Always, that's our number one goal. And innovation that comes in it, and whatever is revealed afterwards, we will use that to, you know, move move the ball down the goal field a little closer, even though they keep moving the goalposts. But that's our goal. So I want to make sure that people understand that that's our first and our foremost, our mission. And then everything that comes afterwards, and as it involves military sexual trauma, because I know that it leads to addiction and substance use,
Suicide. Yeah. There's
suicide, mental health, homelessness. You know, there are a lot of homeless veterans that probably never came forward and had to deal with a lot of things. And MST could very well be the reason why. So, you know, there's our veteran population as well that we want to make sure don't just get sifted through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because no one's trying to overthrow the uniform. It's just, we can do better.
Yeah.
We can do better. We did better on race. We can do better on this. And, you know, the thing about it is, and, you know, I brag about the uniform a lot about this. We are the example for race.
Yes.
We are the standard, because in race, we love each other so completely. Our brothers and sisters, no matter what they look like, we love each other wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing about the uniform.
Yeah.
Is that 70 years ago, people were just so still divided along those lines. But look, now the uniform, that really is the model. This is where people can really look differently and work together and love each other completely and wholeheartedly as they are brothers and sisters in arms.
Correct.
So
No,
we can
it
just
should be the standard. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we've kind of cornered the market on equality as well. You know, a female major gets paid the same amount as a male major. So, you know, do we need more generals, female generals, and you know, as we get up the rank structure? Absolutely. Combat arms is opened up to women now. So when it comes to equality, yes, we've got that, you know, cornered and are able to do that. So if we are the standard and we're a microcosm of our larger society, we need to be the standard for our larger society to model after.
Sure. Now, as an enlisted man, I got to say, we don't need any more generals. I am kidding. I am kidding out there.
My husband has said that many times. He was like, I don't think you should have been an officer. I definitely didn't have the mouth, because I was, you know, my mouth and my facial expression got me in trouble a lot. So maybe I should have been enlisted.
You know, at one point I was an E3 and one of my best buddies from high school was an O3. And he was just like, I remember we were talking one day and he was like, how do you do it? Like, yeah, it is terrible. It is like getting kicked in the stomach all the time. Because, you know, he was a bright guy. And I guess, you know, he considered me at least to be bright enough to. Anyway, so let's tell everybody where they can find you.
So we are on all social media platforms. Glass Soldier is on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, IG. And we're working on a TikTok, because we're trying to pull in that, you know, new generation. But you can go to www.glasssoldier.org. We are definitely looking for all branches for sure. I've got Marines and I've got Army on lock, but I have not tapped into the Navy or the Air Force. So I just want
squarely bunch we are.
Yeah. So I just want to let you know, for those that are still currently serving, our advisory board is completely confidential and anonymous. So we do have people that are on our advisory board that serve, that no one will ever know about because of retaliation. But we do need that feedback, and we desperately want to know how we can serve every single branch. So I just want to let anyone know, if you have a heart to serve and you want to volunteer and help us, help your brothers and sisters, please reach out to us.
Well, I know that there are certainly plenty of sailors in Virginia, which is pretty close to you guys.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Awesome.
So if you've enjoyed this conversation that we've had here with Dr. Poe, and you think that somebody out there would be benefiting from hearing the conversation, please spread the word. Largely what we do here revolves around the recommendations that listeners have to other people within their sphere of influence. So please spread the word about the good things that are going on here with Vet with a Mic, the conversations that we are having that are just completely different from the normal noise that you hear out there in the military space. If there's a particular topic that you would like to have done here on Vet with a Mic, please reach out to me on all the social media platforms as well, or you can reach me at ryan@vetwithamic.com. But as always, however life finds you, hope life finds you well. Till next time.